But I'm just curious how you feel about having all of this attention.
Well, don't forget, everybody loves the sound of their own voice. And that's for damn sure. Otherwise, we wouldn't get up there and make damn fools out of ourselves a lot of times. And but really, it's just to go to a meeting and enjoy the talk and be part of the multitude. I'm not talking about humility, because most of us don't come by that too well, but you feel it, and you're more humble than you think sometimes. So it is just being a part of the multitude.
Hi, I'm Jerry Calloway, an alcoholic. My sobriety date's October 10th, 1980, and I've been running sort of a tabulation. It looks like we're closing on 1,000 years of sobriety speaking here, and there's a lot more than that in this room. Being in this beautiful place, I was sitting there and thinking about a story I heard about a minister who died and went to heaven, and St. Peter himself was showing him around. And they came upon the traditional Catholics, my background with the Latin Mass, Dominus Vobiscum et cum spiritu tuo. And they went a little further, and there was a group of Southern Baptists, and they were all singing hymns. And they went a little further still, and there was this hedge, and there was all this raucous noise and laughter. And the minister said, "Who are they?" St. Peter said, "We don't know. All they'll tell us is their first name, and they say they're only here for a day at a time." Yeah. I was thinking, that would be one heck of a meeting, with Dr. Bob and Bill and Jack, and now Al, and my sponsor, Don Dugan, and Roger Mead, and Dr. Paul, and so many countless others. I started to get a little envious, as a matter of fact. I've had the privilege of being Al's doctor, so I have a different perspective, I think, than the other speakers for the last decade. And that gave me the privilege of knowing his family. I can tell you with absolute certainty that there's a special place in heaven for Lolly. The way she cared for her father these last years especially has been nothing less than amazing. And I saw the pride in his eyes when we talked about the boys. I am concerned about the nepotism in AA. It doesn't seem like I can go to an AA meeting anywhere anymore that there's not an Easthouse in it, if not chairing it. Gary's chairing Boiled Owls when I'm there. Vern's chairing the Sunday morning meeting, and Think Tank, and so many of the other East Houses that I've had the privilege to get to know. Al had health issues that I don't think any of you are aware of. That there's no way in the world he could have lived the number of years he did. People with either severe valvular aortic stenosis or COPD, they're generally dead before 70, often before 65. And Al seemed to beat those odds by a little bit. That episode where where he jumped out of his car, I wasn't there at the Monday night meeting, and ran over his right arm because he thought it was in park, and it wasn't. And it wasn't one of the smaller new Cadillacs. It was one of the old ones, and he didn't even have a broken bone. He ended up in a shock unit. And the next week, I was talking to Steve DeFilippis, the attorney, and he said he needed to talk to Gary or Vern because he hadn't worked out all the details yet, but he thought he'd figure out a way that Al could sue himself. He was a dynamo. He got up there in this crowd of 160 people, and he was, talking about, we're all here. Why? He talked about the absolutes, talked about sex. He had those people in hysterics, and then he started calling on people. Okay, Gallagher, you're next, and remember, this isn't a speaker meeting. And we were driving home, and I said, I'm really happy I'm not the kind of person that would say, I told you so, because I'd probably say, I told you so right now. Thank goodness I would never say anything like I told you so. And he kind of grumbled at me and gave me that mischievous smile of his that we all knew so well. He was just an incredible man. It was such a privilege to be part of his life. If any of you have health issues, If you're a smoker, probably be a good idea to stop. If you stopped, it'd be a good idea to exercise and lose weight. But if you've been told you have some kind of lethal condition, I'd like to point out that Al, we would have given him a medical expiration date of maybe 65, and he went more than 3 decades beyond that. So if someone has told you you have some kind of lethal condition, just stay close to the program and you'll probably outlive your doctors.
So Lolly has been asked to be removed from the agenda. I want to give you one more shot, okay? You know, I met Al, I got sober in 1983. Now, Lolly's going to have to sit up here. I got sober in 1983, and I went to the men's meeting on Thursday night, and I hung around with this guy named Ron Clancy. And Clancy was kissing up to Al Easthouse and sitting in the front table. And so he invited me up to sit with them. And then I got invited by Al to go to a baseball game, a Giant Dodger game with Al and Ron and Gary and Taxicab John. And that was my first experience with Al. And he has been my sponsor since my first sponsor passed away. And I called Ron Clancy the other night. Ron's 85 years old, and he told me about a story that he wanted me to tell. That he had, Lolly, come on up and sit down here. I'm going to be about a half hour. Because I got 18 more stories to tell. So Clancy tells me that he was sitting up there kissing up to Al and Jack. Anybody who was around in those days, we had tables and they smoked in the room, and there really was about 220 guys there. And so Al says to him, did you find the guarantee that's in the big book? And Ron liked to brag that he had 2 degrees from the University of Santa Clara, a good Catholic boy with a lot of guilt. And so he went home and he read the whole book, and he came back the next week and he said he couldn't find it. And Al says, you ding-dong, I'll give you a clue. It's in the first 164 pages. And so Ron goes home again and he reads it, and he comes back the next week and he says, boy, you are a ding-dong. This is how Ron is telling me the story the other night. And he says, we read it at every meeting that you come to. And it is that God could and would if he were sought. And that was his guarantee. And that Clancy got that. He's 31 years sober, and he got that when he had a year. And that was what he had passed on to Ron Clancy. And with that, Lolly, you're up.
I just want to give honor to him. He's been the best dad a girl could ever have. And my mom was the best mom. If I could choose my parents, I would have definitely chosen Alvin Francis and Bernice Olita. I want to tell you something that's a little sacrilegious against AA from the kids' point of view. Thank God I don't have the disease. So you probably aren't going to like this, but I was in junior high. Mom and Dad were getting ready to go to another AA dance. Mom's all dressed up, all cute in her little heels and her cute little dresses, and they were just about ready to go out the door. And I was having to babysit once again for Randy. And I go, you guys, why do you always have to go to your stupid AA meetings? They go, honey, it's not a meeting, we're having a dance. I go, okay, but you're at meetings and you're at dances and you're at the club all the time playing poker, Dad, in the back room. And, you know, can we do something as a family? Can we, like, do something together, spiritual? And I was kind of seeking God then. And they said, well, we'll talk about this tomorrow, honey, okay? My dad did. We'll work this out for you. So he sits me down, and Mom, They said, well, we think you should go to Aldotine. I go, what? And I, what's that? Oh, you like it. It's kids your age. And I go, okay. So I went to Aldotine over at the Alana Club on Fair Avenue. And I had never heard kids talk about their parents. Like this one young man would come home and try to be really quiet because he didn't know what frame of mind his dad was going to be in. That they had to be quiet so dad wouldn't drink more and hit his mom or whatever. And I was like, whoa, okay, I get it. This is why you go all the time. Because my dad went into the program when I was 3, and I have one memory of him being drunk. I didn't know he was drunk until when I was older, because Mom was cooking dinner. She had an apron on, and I was trying to get her attention. And I looked up at my dad, and he was acting kind of funny, and Mom had a skillet in her hand like this. It was an iron skillet. And I was thinking, why is she so mad at my daddy? And then I looked at my dad, and why is my daddy acting so funny? I realized later, he was drunk. But that's my only memory. Vern, unfortunately, has many more drunken memories, but I just want to say that I am so thankful for the program, because my family would not have been, it wouldn't have been such a great place to grow up with my parents and my siblings. And I just want to thank all of you for being such a great part of my dad and my mom's lives. They loved you so much, and thank you for being there for them. And when my sister died, and the AA family is so powerful and so loving, and I just thank you so much, and I am so proud to be Alan Bernice's daughter. Thank you.
Dorothy.
Thank you. My name is Dorothy, and I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Easthouse in 1973. He recruited me into the company that he worked with, and I had the great pleasure of working with him for about 18 years. I talked to Mr. Easthouse. He called me 2 weeks prior to him passing, and he left me a message, and he always told me at the end of every day when we worked together, I love you, girl. He was a very loving, very kind man. I could tell you stories about Mrs. Easthouse would always call at least 3 or 4 times a week, and I'd answer the phone, and she said, how's your skinny ass today? And she would say, you realize that you are the office wife, but I get him at night. Now, I want to know what you do for your nooners. And she'd call me sometimes in the middle of the afternoon, she'd hear this dirty joke. And I mean, well, you guys know Bernice, right? She had some really good dirty jokes. But Mr. Easthouse I came from the South, and I was raised with a grandfather that was a bootlegger. Mr. Easthouse was so intrigued with that. He said, my God, he said, I'm surprised that you're not a drinker. And I was. I became I'm not an alcoholic, maybe borderline. But I did attend a couple of meetings with him, because I came in a little on the shaky side, and he'd say, why don't you go to the meeting with me? And he helped me go through a divorce and the whole thing. He says, and there's lots of men. I said, ooh, I'd like that. So I went to 2 meetings with him, and I'd say, oh my God, look at that guy right there. He'd say, oh, forget it. Just don't even go there. And he'd look around the room, and he'd say, none of these guys. I don't want you seeing any of these guys. He said, none of them. And so I quit going to the meetings, but he kept trying to encourage me. But I want to tell you that Bob Stokes and Jack used to come to the office, And Bob, I don't know if it were you or not, but you guys made a $500 bet on to quit smoking. Do you remember that? Somebody's shaking their heads. Anyway, and I said, okay, I'll hold the $500. And I'm counting it out and the whole thing, and then Bob comes over, or no, it was Jack. Jack came over and he took the money from my hand. He says, we don't trust you. You're a shopping nut. So those guys made a $500 bet that they would quit smoking, or one would have to, do the other. So anyway, that's when he quit smoking. On his, I can't remember which birthday it was, anniversary rather, we got together and we figured out how many ounces of booze or gallons of booze that it would take for all of the years of sobriety that he would have consumed daily. My God, the cake was this big. I mean, to get all of that writing and everything on it, but it came to a whole bunch of booze, I can tell you that. He was my mentor. He was my California father. Bernice was my California mother, and I loved them dearly. And I still have that recording that he called me just 2 weeks before he passed to tell me that he loved me and that he was thinking about me. And thank you for letting me talk.
Where's Gary?
Hi. I'm Gary, I'm an alcoholic. I had a script, or a few things I was going to say, and after listening to all these ding-dongs before me, I think I'm going to change it a little bit. There's a couple things that I got from this, from what I heard, and it sounds to me like the Brocks are right on the Easthouse's ass with sobriety. So, but Milton doesn't know what we've got lurking in the shadows. And also, I found out something else today that is probably going to be in the newspaper tomorrow. That Dad and Johnny O were swinging together. Like they say, what you hear at the Jubilee Center stays at the Jubilee Center. Okay. Behalf of the family, I want to thank all the people that have been very, very helpful in getting this thing together, and also Dad's service of a couple of weeks ago. President Joe, thank you very much, Joe, for what you do. I think Joe probably enjoyed it a lot, because he does enjoy these kinds of things. I want to thank Pastor Kevin for doing what he did a couple of weeks ago when we had the service. He made closure a little bit easier. It was wonderful. I want to thank Pastor Milo for allowing us to be in this facility. I want to thank Gloria for what she's doing back there. Gloria, are you here? Thank you very much. I want to thank Doug Higgins for this wonderful video that we had earlier, and he's filming this one as well. So there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that helped Gloria back and back. So thank you all so much for helping out. We had a tribute to a guy that can't be replaced. Can't be replaced. It's funny because when you're sitting there talking to Dad, when you go over the house and you're one-on-one. And Lolly and I share this, because we discussed this at the funeral a little bit too. When you're one-on-one with him, he doesn't say nothing about his stuff. It's always your stuff. You know, it's always, what about, how's your golf game? How's Dee Dee doing? How's this? How's that? Never about anything about him. And it's been that way for years. He's always, you feel so guilty talking about your shit all the time, you know? So I've got to turn the tide a little bit and tell a story about Dad. He was, and some of you heard this story, and some of you haven't. Dad was having a gallbladder surgery operation at Good Samaritan Hospital. And the surgery was finished, and he was sitting there recouping, and there's another guy in the room. His name was Bill, and Mom came to see Dad. How you doing? How's things going? Fine, real good. Says, why don't you go over and ask Bill what he's in here for? Okay, so you know, Mom, she prances over and says, "Hey, Bill, what you in here for?" She says, "Well, I'm just had my third penile implant." And he says, "Would you like to see it?" Mom says, "No, thank you. That's all right. Why are you doing these things?" "Well, they last about 5 years each, you know, and so I'm having my third one. It's just I'm having a lot of fun." Well, how are you changing? What kind of one are you having this time?" "Last time I had a pressure one, and every time I went to the Safeway, I was carrying groceries out, and I had a little problem, you know." Oh, that's interesting. So after they had a little chit-chat about that, Mom went back to see Dad and talked to Dad. Says, "Alvin, you've got to talk to Bill." And Dad says, "Well, I think I'll probably ask Holt to see if he can look into that. And if it works for Holt, then I'll take a look at it." So he talked to Jack, and he said, "Jack, you got to do something because we need to look into this thing because Mom and Alice are on our ass about this." Jack said, "Well, let me look. 'Cause I heard some guys say you go to get a look at a porno flick, and all of a sudden you might get a little activity or something might happen, you know. So why don't you do that and let me know?" So he went down and got a porno flick, and he got home to Alice, and he told Alice, he says, "Alice, I'm going to turn this flick on. Something might happen." "Well, that's fine. Well, I'm going to be cleaning the house. If something happens, you let me know, will you?" In about 15 minutes, you heard from the television room, "Alice! Alice!" I never heard what happened, but I can just visualize and imagine. And like Dad always talked about he can flower some things up again, so I'm sure there was some flowering some things up. I recall being at a Sillamar about 25 years ago, and oh, by the way, my current sobriety date is October 12, 1976. That's my 10th sobriety date, by the way. Some of you new people don't have to go through all that. If you just kind of follow some of the simple teachings that you've maybe heard here, and some of the things you've heard Dad talk about, some of the simplicities, this program is not difficult. It really isn't. We just happen to be difficult people. And once we get beat down to a state of reasonableness, is only when we can finally realize what this thing's all about. And thank God that God's in this fellowship, because without God, it would never have happened. But I was over to Sillamar 25 years ago. A lot of poker was being played. Dad and I went to Sillamar twice a year, every year for a long time. I still do. And so I was in a poker game late, probably about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. Had a Poker Jones going. And I got to the meeting about 15 minutes late. And walked into the room. The only pair of eyes I saw was you know who. And he had that look of disappointment and disgust on his face. And I knew it because I saw it often. He didn't say a word, neither did I, but I was never late again. Got to tell a little story, sorry, about Jack Holt. Dad was my grand sponsor, incidentally. Of course, Jack was my sponsor. We were in a Sillamar after about 8 or 9 years. There's 150 guys on the waiting list. And we're sitting in this room. There was about 28 or 29 of us. There's 38 now, but there's about 28 of us in the room. And Jack gets up and starts talking and said, "Listen, you guys, you know, there's about 150 guys on this waiting list, and you guys are pretty damn selfish. You may want to think about sharing some of this spot for somebody else. There's a lot of guys out there wanting to get in here." And as you look around the room, you saw some squirming. You saw some guys were getting a little bit nervous. God darn, maybe I should do something about it. Maybe I should let somebody else have my spot. And Holt says, "I'll be damned, I'm going to give anybody my spot. Maybe you guys ought to think about starting another Sillamar or something like that." But it was really interesting that as much as we love the Sillamar, love going there, when I leave that thing, I float. And I thought Jack was going to try to tell me that I had to give my spot to somebody else. But he was really suggesting that maybe we share that with somebody else. Excuse me again, I got one other story I got to tell you, and that was in 1976. I had 3 years of sobriety at the time, and I wasn't doing anything with the steps. I didn't have a sponsor. I was going to a lot of meetings. I was getting a little bored, and I thought, well, maybe physiologically things have changed a little bit, and I might be able to might be able to drink. And I wasn't going to do anything. I wasn't going to go out and do it. I had to go over and get Dad's approval. So So I go over there, I sat down, I asked Dad, I said, Dad, you know, I feel okay, I think things are fine, I think I can drink again, and I'm gonna go out and try it. And again, Dad would not do anything other than just throwing something at you to make you think about it. He says, Gary, why don't you take a look at the track record? Again, that was my 9th time back to the fellowship. Take a look at the track record. And I'm thinking to myself, listening to him talk about track records, what the hell does he know? And I said, well, you know, I'm thinking about doing that. Well, you just let your conscience be your guide. And I went out and drank. 2 weeks later, I came back to the fellowship and never drank again. He was a mentor. He was a wonderful man that was as humble as anybody I've ever met in my life. And I'm just proud, very proud to know. Oh, I got one more story. Excuse me. I got that one more story. Who was here? Who was at that meeting on the 22nd? There was a lot of guys in here that went to, look at that, look at those hands. There was 103 guys who were in that meeting, and when that meeting started, Vern announced his birthday because it was on his birthday, and 103 guys stood up and gave him a standing ovation. And it was wonderful. And of course, Dad, he cut off his middle finger years ago in the mill over here in Santa Clara, so he went like this, you know. He showed some humility like he always did. And so he talked about the 4 absolutes, and he talked about honesty specifically, and he talked for a few minutes, as has been pointed out earlier, and he says, everybody's going to talk 3 minutes or you're going to get gonged, and so he called on Vern to end the meeting, and at 5 minutes to 9. So Vern talked for 3 minutes. It was 2 minutes to 9, and Vern, as he's leaving the podium, Vern says, well, you may want to call on somebody else, and Dad says, hey, listen, I got this thing handled. You go sit down and shut up. Vern went and sat down, and Dad talked for 2 minutes about the book, the power, and the people. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vern, alcoholic. And everybody's telling their sobriety date. Mine's October 2nd, 1970. And what makes me feel so good about this is there's people in the room tonight that have been sober a lot longer. And that's good. You know, you guys have rocked my boat tonight because it takes a lot to pull a tear out of me, and well, it happened today. It happened today. When Doug put that video on of Dad and Pat's interviewing him, that got me. And it was so nice to watch him and hear him talk. And it was like he was here, you know. And I got choked up. And I just want to thank everybody for being here and the people that come up here and talked. It just brings back old memories of years back of how he was and how good he was. And I'm so proud to have been his son, and the uniqueness of my relation with my dad is I knew him longer than anybody here, and I shared a lot of stuff with him, and I shared at the other memorial that we had for the smaller family memorial, and I got to work with Dad with the tools. And we built a few houses together, just me and him. And we get a little help now and then to put some beams in or raise some walls, but we did it together. And I got to experience that. And at that time, he was only 45 years old. He was, I mean, you know, that time I thought that was kind of old, but hell, that was a young man. And he had He had a lot of spring in his step back then, you know. But I'm just honored to have been able to be his son. This is fantastic. And I looked at the list, you know, when we were talking about the other day, all the people were going to talk, and I said, oh, for Christ's sake, you know, and I'm so happy that it worked out the way it did. It's just wonderful. I'm overwhelmed is what I am, and there's not too much that overwhelms me, you know, but I am overwhelmed. I loved my father. I loved him a lot.
That wraps it up. We've got refreshments around the corner here. Shall we end the celebration of life with the Lord's Prayer? If everybody will stand. And if you can, grab the hand of somebody next to you. One little commercial before we pray. This video of today's celebration of life will be on the website soberrun.com. Doug, when will that be up? Yes, for you impatient people. His phone number's on the card he passed out. You can call him and find out. Sparky, will you lead us?
I'd like to say we kept us sober today, but brought us all here today.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory forever. Amen. Keep coming back. It works.
This is Doug Higgins for SoberRun.com. This has been the Al Easthouse Memorial Celebration of Life, August 24th, 2013. Thanks for joining us.
So when I read that piece of paper sitting in my kitchen table, I said, well, I'll try these new dogs. But I told the guy when he come out on the phone, I said, if you got anything to do with religion, I don't want a damn thing to do with it. So forget it. He said, look, asshole, if you want to talk about staying sober, we'll come out there. Otherwise, you can go right straight to hell. What do you think of that? I said, I'll be here.